The last time something really mattered, you stayed calm, and you drove home feeling like you'd lost. You know the drive. Hands at 10 and 2, radio off because music felt like too much company. Rehearsing the sentence you should have said, the one that arrived in your mouth about 4 minutes too late. And underneath the rehearsal, quieter, a small, confusing shame, because you did the thing you're supposed to do. You kept your voice level. You didn't raise it, didn't cry, didn't let your face do anything you'd regret. Everyone in that room would have called you the reasonable one. So why did it feel like you left something of yourself behind in that room? Here's what nobody tells you about composure. There are two kinds of stillness that look identical from the outside, and the difference between them is the difference between a life you're living and a life you're managing. One kind of stillness comes from being so completely present that nothing can knock you out of yourself. The other kind comes from a door you closed a long time ago and never told anyone about. Both of them read as calm. Only one of them is peace. Tonight we're going to sit with that difference, slowly, with a man who spent his entire life studying what actually happens inside a person under pressure, and who would have found our modern worship of the unbothered face a little strange. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, the slower, quieter look at what's actually going on inside you, go ahead and subscribe. That's the whole ask. This channel grows one quiet person at a time, and it's usually someone sitting exactly where you're sitting right now. Miyamoto Musashi wrote a book in the last year of his life, in a cave, dying, with nothing left to prove. It's called the Book of 5 Rings. Gorin no Sho in Japanese, which just means the Book of 5 Scrolls, one for each element he used to organize what he'd learned. He was a ronin, a swordsman with no lord and no house behind him, which mattered more than it sounds. It meant no one was managing his reputation. It meant he'd spent his life without the safety of belonging to anybody. And in that book, buried in the practical instruction about footwork and timing, he says something that has almost nothing to do with sword fighting and almost everything to do with the drive home you just took. He says never become attached to a single weapon. Never fall in love with one stance, one school, one way of meeting what's coming at you. Because the moment a fighter has a favorite move, that move stops being a choice. It becomes the only thing he can do. And a person who can only do one thing is not skilled. He's cornered, and he doesn't know it, because from the inside being cornered feels like having a philosophy. Sit with that for a second in your own life, because you have a favorite move. Most of the sensitive ones do. Yours is going quiet. Yours is the level voice, the reasonable tone, the calm that arrives automatically the second the temperature in the room goes up. And you learned it so early, and it worked so well that you stopped noticing it was a move at all. You started calling it your personality. You started calling it maturity. Some part of you started calling it spiritual. Musashi would have looked at that and asked one question, and it's not the question you'd expect. He wouldn't have asked whether calm is good. He'd have asked whether you can still put it down. Can you? When was the last time you chose something else? Not exploded, chose. Deliberately let the heat show, because the moment in front of you actually called for heat, and you decided the moment deserved the truth more than you deserved to be seen as easy. If you can't remember, that's not a failure. That's just information. That's the observing eye opening a little, and we're going to keep it open for the next half hour. Nobody sat you down and taught you this. That's what makes it so hard to see. Somewhere along the way, in a house you can still picture, you learn to read a room by sound. The specific weight of a car door closing in the driveway. The pause between the front door opening and the first word spoken. Whether the dishes were being set down or set down hard. Kids who grow up with that antenna don't develop it because they're wise. They develop it because information was safety, and reading the weather early meant you could get ahead of it. And the way you got ahead of it was by becoming small and smooth, by having no edges to catch on, by being, above everything else, easy. Then you grew up and the world rewarded you for it. That's the part that makes it stick. Teachers wrote that you were a pleasure to have in class. Managers used the word steady in your review, and you felt the little warmth of it, and you didn't examine it. Friends started saying you were the chill one, the grounded one, the person they call when everything's falling apart because you never make it worse. Nobody ever calls you when they need someone to be furious on their behalf. Millions of people are living inside this exact arrangement right now, and almost none of them would describe it as a problem. They'd describe it as being good at life. A whole generation of us got quietly promoted into the role of the one who doesn't need much, and then wondered why we feel invisible in rooms we're standing in the middle of. The reward and the erasure came in the same envelope. Now, Musashi had a word for what we're doing here. He talked about two kinds of eyes, can and ken. Ken is the looking eye, the one that takes in surfaces, the flash of movement, what's obviously happening. Can is the observing eye, the one that sees the shape of a thing, the intention underneath the motion, what's actually going on. And he said something people repeat all the time without letting it cost them anything. The observing eye is strong, the looking eye is weak. Everyone applies that outward. See through the other guy. Read the room, read the opponent, read the intention behind the words. Almost nobody turns it around. Turn it around. Look at your own calm with the observing eye instead of the looking eye. The looking eye sees a person handling themselves well. The observing eye asks what the calm is doing. What's its job? What is it protecting, and from whom, and at what cost? And was that cost ever agreed to by anyone, or did a scared kid make the deal alone in a hallway 30 years ago? This is the part that tends to land in the chest, so let me say it clearly. Looking at this honestly is not the same as deciding you've been fake your whole life. You haven't. That stillness kept you safe, and it worked, and it probably kept the peace in a house that badly needed some. You don't owe it an apology. You owe it an update. A weapon that saved you once will still be in your hand 40 years later if you never consciously set it down. That's not a moral failing. That's just what hands do. And here's where the relief starts, if you'll let it in. If your calm is a move and not the truth about who you are, then you are not actually the flat, contained, unbothered person you've been performing for 2 decades. There's someone underneath that. Someone with opinions and heat and preferences and a real voice. You didn't lose that person. You put them behind a door because the door made life survivable. The door still opens. That's the whole thing. The door still opens, and knowing where it is puts you ahead of most people who go their entire lives assuming the smooth surface was all they ever were. Let's talk about what actually happens in your body when you hold the line. Because the story we tell ourselves is that keeping it in makes it go away. You feel the surge, you clamp down, the surge subsides, everyone stays comfortable, the meeting ends. Clean transaction. That's the assumption underneath the whole idea that composure is free. Researchers have been putting people in rooms and testing that assumption for about 30 years now, and what they keep finding is more interesting than a simple warning. When you clamp down on the outward expression while the feeling is still running, the feeling doesn't fade on schedule. The face goes still. The inside doesn't. Blood pressure climbs. And this is the strange part, the part that changed how I think about my own quiet. In studies where 2 people talk and one of them is holding their expression in, the blood pressure goes up in the other person too. They can't see what you're holding. They can feel that you're holding something. That's not mysticism. That's not energy in the magical sense. That's just what it is to be a social animal with a nervous system tuned to other nervous systems. When you go smooth, some part of the person across from you registers a wall where a face should be, and they start working harder, watching closer, trying to find you. You think you're giving them peace. You're giving them a locked door with the lights on behind it. Now picture your Sunday dinner. The specific one, at the table, you know, with the person you've decided it isn't worth it with. You're pleasant. You pass things. You ask about the car, the job, the weather in whatever city. And the whole time, the room has this low hum in it, and everyone can hear the hum, and everyone has agreed to pretend the hum is the refrigerator. That hum is what people mean when they say someone's energy is off. Not a field, not a frequency. The accumulated weight of everything present in a room and not said. You've walked into rooms like that and known within 4 seconds. You've also created rooms like that and told yourself you were keeping the peace. Here's the reframe, and I want to give it to you gently, because it's easy to hear this as an accusation, and it isn't one. The alternative to swallowing it is not blowing up. Those aren't the only two doors, even though those are the only two doors you were shown. There's a third thing, and it's the thing Musashi actually cared about, and it's much less dramatic than either option. It's this: knowing what's true in you before you decide what to do with it. The people who study this found something else worth carrying. Putting a feeling into words, just naming it accurately, to yourself, in plain language, measurably lowers the intensity of the reaction. Not by fighting it, by seeing it. The part of the brain that runs the alarm gets quieter when the part that handles language gets specific, which means the sentence "I'm angry" said inside your own head, in the parking lot, before you walk in, does more real work than an hour of pressing your lips together. You already knew this in some form. Think back to the last time you told one person the whole truth about something you'd been carrying and felt 8 pounds lighter afterward, even though absolutely nothing about your situation had changed. Nothing changed except you stopped hiding it from yourself in order to hide it from them. If that lands, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this reach the next person who's been holding their face still for 20 years and calling it maturity. Watch what happens to the thing you didn't say. It doesn't leave. It goes somewhere. It's 11:40 at night and you're in bed with your phone 6 inches from your face and you're typing. Long, precise, devastating. Every point in order. The tone perfect. Wounded but dignified. The sentence that would finally make them understand. You get to the end. You read it twice. You delete it. Then you lie there in the blue afterglow with your heart going faster than a person lying down should have a heart going, and you tell yourself you handled that well. You took the high road, but you didn't handle it. You just moved it. It's 2 in the morning now, and it's still in the room with you. The stuff you swallow doesn't dissolve. It converts. That's the part I wish someone had told me at 25, because the conversion is so slow you never catch it happening. Anger you don't name turns into distance. Distance turns into the flat, pleasant voice you use with your brother now, the one that means nothing is wrong and nothing is possible. Hurt you don't name turns into keeping score, and keeping score turns into a kind of exhaustion where you're technically still in the friendship, but you stopped bringing anything real to it about 2 years ago. The group chat that went quiet didn't go quiet because everyone got busy. It went quiet because at some point 4 separate people decided it wasn't worth it. On 4 separate nights, alone, each one of them thinking they were being generous. Musashi has a precept about this that people usually read as coldness. In the Dokkodo, his list of 21 rules for how to live, written days before he died, the title meaning something close to the way of walking alone. He says resentment and complaint are appropriate neither for yourself nor for others. Read fast. That sounds like a man telling you to shut up and take it. Read with the observing eye, and it's the opposite. Resentment is what anger becomes when it never got used. It's the sludge left in the pipe. He's not telling you to swallow more. He's telling you not to let the fire sit there and rot, because rotted fire doesn't burn anymore. It just poisons the water and makes you smaller. And you can feel the difference, physically, between those two states. Anger has heat and direction. It wants something specific. Resentment is cold and has no direction at all. It just wants the other person to somehow already know. That's the actual cost of the calm you've been performing. Not that you're inauthentic. Nobody's keeping score on authenticity. The cost is that you've been slowly becoming unreachable to the people you love most, one swallowed sentence at a time, and from the inside it has felt like being good. Now here's what I want you to take from that, because I'm not going to leave you sitting in it. The fact that you feel the hum, that you notice the residue, that you lie awake at 2 in the morning aware something got left unsaid, that's not oversensitivity. That's the observing eye doing exactly what it's for. Most people never register any of this. They swallow the same sentences and feel nothing but a vague fatigue they blame on their job. You feel the ledger. That's uncomfortable. And it's also the only reason anything can change. You can't set down a weapon you don't know you're holding. Musashi's whole obsession, the thing he chased into a cave at the end of his life, was seeing accurately. Not winning. Seeing. Everything else came from that. And by that measure, the discomfort you're feeling right now isn't a symptom. It's the beginning of the skill. Now we need to go somewhere harder, and I want you with me for it, because this is the part almost nobody says out loud. calm can be a weapon, not a metaphor. A weapon used deliberately, with intent, by people who have learned exactly how effective it is. You've been on the receiving end. You know the moment. You're trying to explain something that actually hurt, and your voice is doing the thing voices do when something matters, and the other person leans back and lowers their volume by half and says, very evenly, that they'd be happy to discuss this when you can be rational. And just like that, the subject changes. You came in to talk about what happened. Now you're talking about your tone. Now you're the problem in the room, and the person who caused the injury is the calm, reasonable adult, and the score is settled before the conversation started. You leave that exchange apologizing for the volume of the sentence instead of getting an answer to it. Here's the mechanism, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. In our culture, we've quietly agreed that composure equals credibility. The calmer speaker is assumed to be the more truthful one. So if you can stay smooth while the other person is shaking, you win, regardless of who's right. Composure became a shortcut for correctness. And anyone who figures that out can use flatness as a way to never be accountable to anyone, ever again. The cruelest version of this is that it works best on the people who are most honest about what they feel. The ones who show up with heat in their voice because the thing genuinely matters to them get labeled unstable. The ones who feel very little, or who've perfected the art of not showing it, get labeled wise. Think about how many rooms in your life have been run by that scoreboard. The performance review where you were told to work on your delivery. The family where the loudest person and the coldest person somehow both had more power than you. The relationship where every hard conversation ended with you saying sorry for the way you said it. And now the harder half of this, offered gently, because it applies to almost everyone who's still watching at this point. You've used it too. Not maliciously. That's what makes it hard to catch. But there have been arguments where some part of you knew that staying smooth while they got louder was going to make you the reasonable one, and you leaned into it. You watched them lose the thread while you kept perfect composure, and you felt something that wasn't exactly peace. A little cool satisfaction. The unbothered face is a way of winning without ever having to be in the conversation. If you just felt something drop in your stomach, stay with me. That recognition is not a verdict on your character. It's the observing eye. Finally pointed the right direction, and it costs something to look. But notice what it also gives you. If calm can be used that way, by them, by you, then calm by itself can't be the virtue. It's neutral. It's a stance. It's a weapon in the hand, and Musashi's entire warning was about mistaking the weapon for the way. What makes stillness good is what it's serving. Stillness that keeps you present, that lets you stay in the room and hear something hard without shattering. That's mastery. Stillness that keeps you unreachable, that ends conversations by making the other person feel crazy for having a heartbeat. That's armor pretending to be enlightenment. Same face. Opposite thing. And now that you have the question, you can ask it in real time, in an actual kitchen, in an actual argument, which is worth more than any technique. Is my calm helping me stay here, or is it helping me leave without moving? So let's talk about the fire you've been apologizing for your whole life. Anger has a terrible reputation among gentle people, and the reason is simple. You've seen what it does when it's driving. Maybe you grew up under someone else's, and you decided early, before you had words for it, that you would never be that. That decision is one of the most honorable things a child can make, and it's also the reason a fully grown adult flinches at their own heat. But here's what your anger actually is, underneath the noise. It's a detector. It fires when something you value gets crossed. That's its whole job. It's the part of you that keeps track of what's yours, what matters, what you won't allow. And it goes off the same way a smoke alarm goes off, loud and inconvenient and not always accurate, but pointed at something real. A person who feels no anger isn't peaceful. A person who feels no anger has stopped registering violations. They've turned the alarm off and called the silence serenity. So when you feel that heat come up in your chest at your sister's comment about your job, the one dressed as concern, the useful question isn't, how do I get rid of this? The useful question is, what does this thing know that I've been talking myself out of? Usually the answer is embarrassingly clear once you ask. It knows you've been talked about instead of talked to. It knows a line got crossed for the fourth time. It knows you agreed to something you never actually wanted to agree to, and the heat is just the part of you that still remembers you had a preference. Third person for a moment, because I don't want this to sound like a private failing. Across this whole country tonight, there are people driving home from shifts they can barely stand, running conversations in their heads, aware of a pressure with no name, and every single one of them has been taught that the pressure is a character flaw to be managed. Almost none of them have been taught that it's data. We got very good at teaching people to regulate the alarm and completely stopped teaching them to read it. Now, does reading it mean you act on all of it? No. Obviously no. Half of what your alarm reports is old news, the flare of heat that belongs to something from 1998 and just happens to be wearing your coworker's face today. Musashi has that covered too, in the first line of the Dokkodo, and it's not the line people expect from a duelist. Accept everything just the way it is. Not approve of everything. Not tolerate everything. See it as it actually is before you move. Including this, I'm angrier than this moment deserves, and some of this is old, and I can hold that without either performing calm or setting the kitchen on fire. That's the third door. It's not suppression, and it's not eruption. It's accuracy. And accuracy is where your sensitivity turns from a liability into the thing that makes you dangerous in the best sense of the word. You already notice more than the people around you. You already feel the shift when someone's tone changes by 2 degrees. You've spent your whole life apologizing for the volume of your inner world. That inner world is the instrument. It's the only instrument you've got for knowing what's true. The goal was never to turn it down. The goal was to stop letting it run the room from behind a locked door. If this is putting language to something you've carried for a long time, send it to the one person in your life who'd understand. Not a mass forward, just the one who's been the calm one in their family too, and has never once been asked what it cost them. Here's the turn, and I think you can feel it coming. You've been trying to answer the wrong question. Your whole adult life, when things got hard, the question in your head was some version of, how do I stay calm? How do I not let this get to me? How do I keep my face still, my voice level, my composure intact? And that question has an answer, which is why it's so seductive. You can get good at it. You've gotten very good at it. But it's a question about how to appear. Every one of its answers ends in the same place. You, managed, contained, presentable, and about 6 inches behind your own eyes, watching your life from the cheap seats.